In the year 2147, when the sky above every major city looked like fractured glass and the stars flickered like a dying signal, humanity no longer trusted time, because time itself had become unstable, unpredictable, and dangerously fragile. And yet in the middle of that unraveling world lived Aria and Kale, two ordinary people trying to hold on to something that felt real in a reality that constantly shifted beneath their feet, where buildings glitched in and out of existence for fractions of seconds, where memories didn't always match yesterday, and where the government's official broadcasts calmly referred to the phenomenon as the drift, as if giving it a name somehow made it less terrifying, less catastrophic, less final. But for Aria, none of the scientific explanations or emergency warnings mattered as much as the small, almost invisible moment when she first noticed that Kale's hand, while resting in hers, flickered like static, disappearing for less than a heartbeat before returning as if nothing had happened. And he laughed it off at first, making one of his usual jokes about how time didn't like him, how he was probably late in some other timeline too. But Aria didn't laugh, because something deep inside her tightened, a quiet instinct that whispered that this wasn't just another glitch in the world, it was something personal, something targeted, something wrong in a way that felt irreversible. And over the following days those flickers became more frequent, more noticeable, until objects Kale touched would sometimes fail to register his presence. Doors wouldn't open for him, scanners wouldn't detect him, and once, horrifyingly, a stranger walked straight through him as if he were made of nothing but fading light. And that was the moment the fear became real, the moment denial shattered, the moment Aria dragged him to one of the last functioning research labs where scientists were still desperately trying to understand the drift, where walls were covered in equations no one fully trusted anymore and screens displayed timelines branching and collapsing like dying trees. And after hours of scanning, analyzing, recalibrating, and rechecking, one exhausted scientist finally looked at Aria with the kind of expression people reserve for truths that cannot be softened and said that Kale wasn't just affected by the drift, he was being erased by it, systematically, progressively, as if the universe itself had decided he was an error that needed correction, as if he had never been meant to exist in this version of reality. And Aria refused to accept that, refused to let the world reduce the person she loved to a statistical anomaly, a temporal mistake, because to her he was real. His laughter was real, his memories were real, their love was real, and no collapsing timeline had the authority to decide otherwise, so she demanded a solution, any solution, even if it was dangerous, experimental, or completely untested. And after a long silence the scientist hesitated before revealing that there might be one way, a theoretical method they had never successfully attempted, involving traveling back to the exact moment when the original experiment that caused the drift went wrong, a moment believed to be the origin point of all temporal instability, and stopping it before it happened, effectively rewriting the entire timeline from that point forward. But the warning came immediately after, heavy and unavoidable, that changing the past at such a fundamental level would alter everything that followed, every event, every decision, every meeting, including the moment Aria and Kale first met, meaning that even if she succeeded, even if she saved his existence, there was a very real possibility that in the new timeline they would never find each other again, that their entire relationship would simply vanish, replaced by a version of reality where they were strangers. And Kale, despite his weakening condition, despite the way parts of him now faded in and out like a corrupted image, told her not to do it, told her that some things shouldn't be changed, that maybe this was how it was supposed to be, that maybe fighting the universe would only break it further. But Aria saw the fear behind his calm words, saw the way he tried to protect her even as he was disappearing, and she made her decision not out of logic but out of something deeper, something stubborn and unyielding, because for her the idea of watching him slowly vanish, moment by moment, memory by memory, was worse than losing him all at once, worse than resetting everything, worse than becoming a stranger in a world she saved. So she agreed to the plan, and preparations began immediately, the lab converting into a controlled temporal launch site, a machine built from salvaged technology and desperate ingenuity, humming with unstable energy as calculations ran endlessly to pinpoint the exact second of the original failure. And during those final hours Aria and Kale stayed together in the quiet corner of the lab, holding on to each other as if they could anchor themselves against the collapsing timeline, talking about small things instead of the massive, terrifying reality ahead of them, remembering moments that might soon no longer exist, laughing softly at memories that could disappear forever. And when the time came, when the machine was ready and the coordinates were locked, Kale's form was already fading at the edges, his voice sometimes cutting out mid-sentence like a broken signal, and he held her hand one last time. His grip weaker than before but still real, still him, and he told her that if she forgot him, if the new timeline erased everything they had been, it would still be worth it as long as she lived, as long as she found happiness, and she shook her head through tears, refusing to accept that their story could end so easily, promising him that somehow, in some way, she would find him again, even if the universe tried to erase the path between them. And then the machine activated, flooding the room with blinding blue light as time itself seemed to tear open, reality bending inward as Aria stepped forward into the unknown, into the past, into a moment that would determine everything. And when the light faded, she found herself standing in a world that felt almost unreal in its stability, the sky whole and unbroken, the air calm, the city untouched by glitches or distortions, a version of reality. Before everything went wrong, before the drift began, and for a moment she simply stood there, overwhelmed by the silence of a world that hadn't yet learned to fear time, but she didn't have the luxury of hesitation, because somewhere in this timeline the experiment was about to begin, the event that would shatter everything, so she moved quickly, navigating through the city using fragmented data and half-remembered coordinates until she found the facility. Heavily secured but not prepared for someone who knew exactly what was about to happen, and as she made her way inside, blending urgency with precision, she caught a glimpse of him, a younger Kale walking through a hallway, completely stable, completely real, unaware of the future that awaited him, unaware of her, and the sight hit her harder than anything else so far, because here he was, alive and whole, but not hers, not yet, not ever if she succeeded. And for a moment she wanted to stop, to talk to him, to warn him, to somehow preserve even a fragment of what they had, but she forced herself forward, because this wasn't about holding on to the past. It was about saving his future, even if that future didn't include her. And when she reached the central lab where the experiment was about to begin, she saw the scientists preparing the device, calibrating energy levels they didn't fully understand, standing on the edge of a discovery that would destroy their world. And she didn't hesitate, overriding systems, shutting down processes, trying to stop the chain reaction before it could start, alarms blaring as the system resisted her interference, as the experiment destabilized in ways it wasn't designed to handle, and for a terrifying moment it seemed like she might fail, like history was too powerful to change, like the drift was inevitable, but she pushed harder, sacrificing safety protocols, forcing a shutdown at the exact critical moment. And then everything went silent, the energy dissipating instead of exploding, the catastrophic failure prevented, the origin of the drift erased before it could exist. And as the alarms died down and the facility stabilized, Aria felt the weight of what she had done settle over her, because she knew that from this point forward, the timeline would rebuild itself differently, reshaping every event that followed, including her own life. And as reality began to shift around her, subtle at first and then increasingly profound, she felt memories slipping, details blurring, pieces of her past rewriting themselves to match the new timeline, and she held onto one thing as tightly as she could, one name, one face, one promise, Kale, repeating it in her mind like an anchor as the world transformed, until finally everything went dark. And when she opened her eyes again, she was sitting in a quiet cafe in a peaceful, stable city, no cracks in the sky, no flickering lights, no sign that time had ever been broken, and for a moment she simply breathed, taking in the normalcy of it all, the absence of chaos, the success of her mission. But there was a hollow space inside her, a feeling of something missing that she couldn't quite define, like a memory just out of reach, like a dream fading too quickly to recall, and she didn't know why she felt it, didn't know what had been lost, only that something important was gone. And as she sat there trying to understand the strange weight in her chest, someone approached her table, a man she had never seen before, and yet something about him felt familiar in a way she couldn't explain, and he smiled politely, asking if the seat was taken, and she looked up at him, at the face that should have been a stranger, and for a brief, unexplainable moment, something in her recognized him, something deeper than memory, deeper than logic, a connection that had survived even the rewriting of time itself, and she hesitated before answering, her voice uncertain, but soft, asking if she knew him, and he shook his head slightly, still smiling, saying that he didn't think so, but that he had the strange feeling that he'd been looking for her, and neither of them understood why those words mattered so much, why the moment felt bigger than it should, why something invisible seemed to pull them together despite a timeline that had erased their past. And as they sat there, Two strangers at the beginning of something neither could remember but both could feel. The universe, for all its complexity and fragility, quietly proved that some connections are stronger than time, that some stories refuse to end even when reality itself is rewritten, and that even in a world where everything can be erased, rewritten, or forgotten, there are bonds that find a way to begin again.